Hello, thank you so much for watching another video in this April online professional development session. This is our fifth video. Thank you very much for your emails. I really appreciate reading your thoughts and your questions and your insights. And I'm super excited that you are trying some of these lessons with your students, and I continue to look forward to your emails this week. So please do email me with your comments and your thoughts. I truly appreciate that. So today's lesson is talking with our students about our inner voice as we're reading, because we know that reading is not just reading words. And I believe that students learn first how to read words, and then they learn to follow the story, or they learn to follow the facts, and then they continually are developing the more that we model in our read aloud for them of what goes on in our minds. What is it that we're thinking as we're reading, and how can we be close readers, pay attention to the text that we're reading, and make sure that the inner voice is keeping us relating to the text. And I teach my students that there are certain questions and thoughts that go through my mind in the inner voice. And one thing is that I'm always wondering what's going to happen next, or why something happened, or wondering about something that's said in the text, why that might be. I'm also thinking what's important as I'm reading, and I define what's important based off of what absolutely must happen in that story or that text for the story to move forward. And if you took that one of those important pieces out, would it be the same story? And I then talk with them about what's interesting. So the difference between important and interesting. Interesting is what usually makes us really want to read the book. It's the imagery of describing the setting, or the words that the author uses to describe the people that are there, for us to better get to know them and their situation. But there is a difference between important and interesting. A book might be much shorter if we just stuck with the important, but maybe it wouldn't be as wonderful to read without all of the interesting language and the interesting elements about the story that the writer includes. And I also talk with my students about the heart of the text that we're reading, meaning, what is the theme? What is the message, the author's purpose? Why did the author write that story? What does he or she want us thinking about as we read the story? And thinking about when we're done with the story. For instance, friendship might be the heart of a story, and this friendship that develops, and how does that affect us to read about a wonderful friendship where two people are so good to each other, and how does that affect us in thinking about maybe how we treat other people in our own lives. So I'm going to use, because of Winn-Dixie again, it seems to be working well in these videos, and I'm going to read chapter 3, and I'm going to share my thinking just as I do with my students, using those for thoughts, questions, prompts, whatever you want to call them, to stay close to the text. So here we go. So today I'm going to read chapter 3 from Because of Winn-Dixie. And we know that yesterday we learned a little bit more about the preacher. And yesterday we spent some time where we stopped and we were thinking, and we were considering and maybe reconsidering at one point, would the preacher let Opal keep this wonderful dog, Winn-Dixie? And it turned out that the preacher did, when we thought about what was said in the text, that the preacher liked to help people that needed help. Winn-Dixie was staying. So now I'm going to read on today, chapter 3, and I'm wondering, so will Winn-Dixie work out okay in this trailer park, even though animals are not allowed? Will this cause any problems, because Opal really isn't supposed to be there? Children aren't supposed to be there. I'm wondering if this dog is going to help with Opal's relationship with the preacher, her father. And it sounds like her father is truly a dedicated preacher and spends a lot of time on his work of helping others, but Maybe Opal needs a little attention. So I'm wondering about that. And I'm looking for things that are important that happen in the text and things that are interesting and if some themes are emerging. So here I go. Chapter 3. I started in on Winn-Dixie right away, trying to clean him up. First, I gave him a bath. I used the garden hose and some baby shampoo. He stood still for it, but I could tell he didn't like it. He looked insulted, and the whole time he didn't show me his teeth or wag his tail once. After he was all washed and dried, I brushed him good. I used my own hairbrush and worked real hard at all the knots and patches of fur stuck together. He didn't mind being brushed. He wiggled his back like it felt pretty good. So in my mind, what I'm thinking at this point is it's continuing my thought that Opal is so sweet, that this is, in my mind, actually important that she would use her own hairbrush to take care of this dog. And I think that there is, the heart of this is that we're getting to know Opal and truly how caring she is. And I think that's a theme that's emerging, that the author wants to think about how we take care of other people that need help, and even if it's a dog. The whole time I was working on him, I was talking to him, and he listened. I told him how we were alike. See, I said, you don't have any family, and neither do I. I've got the preacher, of course, but I don't have a mama. I mean, I have one, but I don't know where my mama is. She left when I was 3 years old. I can't hardly remember her. And I bet you don't remember your mama much either, Winn-Dixie. So we're both almost like orphans. Winn-Dixie looked straight at me when I said that to him, like he was feeling relieved to finally have somebody understand his situation. I nodded my head at him and went on talking. I don't even have any friends, because I had to leave them all behind when we moved here from Whately. Whately is way up north in Florida. Have you ever been to North Florida, Winn-Dixie? Winn-Dixie looked down at the ground like he was trying to remember if he had been there or not. So again, I'm thinking about what I'm reading. I'm staying close to the text, and I think it's very important to learn that Opal's mother left her when she was 3 years old. She probably doesn't remember her. And Opal, although she has her father, she considers herself an orphan. She considers herself someone who's been left. And I think that this really is important, that maybe she feels disconnected with other people. Maybe she doesn't know anyone else whose mother has left their baby, their young child. And she's connecting with this dog. You're an orphan too. So I am thinking and wondering as well, when I think about that that's important, it makes me wonder, where's this friendship going? You know what I said? Ever since we moved here, I've been thinking about my mama extra hard, more than I ever did when I was in Whately, Florida. Winn-Dixie twitched his ears and raised his eyebrows. I think the preacher thinks about my mama all the time, too. He's still in love with her. I know that because I heard the ladies at the church in Whately talking about the preacher. They said he's still hoping she'll come back home, but he doesn't tell me that. He won't talk to me about her at all. I want to know more about her. I want to know my mama. But I'm afraid to ask the preacher. I'm afraid he'll get mad at me. Winn-Dixie looked at me hard, like he was trying to say something. What? I said. He stared at me. You think I should make the preacher tell me about her, tell me about my mama? Winn-Dixie looked at me so hard he sneezed. I'll think about it, I said. When I was done working on him, Winn-Dixie looked a whole lot better. He still had his bald spots, but the fur that he did have cleaned up real nice. It was all shiny and soft. You could still see his ribs, but I intended to feed him good, and that would take care of that. I couldn't do anything about his crooked yellow teeth because he got into a sneezing fit every time I started to brush them with my toothbrush, and I finally had to give up. But for the most part, he looked a whole lot better, and so I took him into the trailer and showed him to the preacher. Daddy, I said. So again, I'm thinking here. This is interesting. She is telling Winn-Dixie how she feels, and she is saying how much she misses her mother. And you can tell that she loves the preacher, and she knows he misses her mama that left them. I think this is all very important. It's not just interesting, that it is really a part of this story of where they have been and how they have come to this new place, and that she doesn't have any friends. That's what I'm also thinking that's important, that she has a dog, and I think again, it shows that she loves this dog. She's using her own toothbrush to brush her dog's teeth. So there's a lot of important things coming out in this chapter. He said. He was working on a sermon and kind of muttering to himself. Daddy, I wanted to show you the new Winn-Dixie. The preacher put down his pencil and rubbed his nose, and finally he looked up. Well, he said, smiling real big at Winn-Dixie. Well now, don't you look handsome? Winn-Dixie smiled back at the preacher. He went over and put his head in the preacher's lap. He smells nice, too, said the preacher. He rubbed Winn-Dixie's head and looked into his eyes. Daddy, I said, real quick before I lost all my nerve. I've been talking with Winn-Dixie. Is that right? The preacher said. He scratched Winn-Dixie's head. I've been talking to him, and he agreed with me that since I'm 10 years old, you should tell me 10 things about my mama. Just 10, that's all I need. 10 things. The preacher stopped rubbing Winn-Dixie's head and held real still. I could see him thinking about pulling his head back into his shell. 1 thing for each year I'd been alive, I told him. Please? Winn-Dixie looked up at the preacher and kind of gave him a nudge with his nose. The preacher sighed. He said to Winn-Dixie, I should have guessed you were going to be trouble. Then he looked at me. Come on, Opal, he said. Sit down, and I will tell you 10 things about your mama. Oh, wow. So this chapter, I think that there were a lot of important things that happen in this chapter, and that there are themes and there's a heart developing. In my mind, I'm thinking about how this dog, this stray dog who she randomly met, Opal met in the Winn-Dixie, she's brought the dog home. She's taking such good care of the dog, and she's able to talk to the dog, and having the dog to talk to gave her the courage to approach her preacher father and ask him about her mother. And it makes me think that this is important, that this is a 10-year-old girl who probably can't remember her mother because she left when she was 3, yet she sees that her father's really sad that the mother left. And now I'm wondering, what was her mother like? I'm wondering, why did her mother leave? And I'm wondering why the father is so sad. What is the story behind why this mother has left them? And I think it's interesting that the author just chose that she's 10, and so there's 10 interesting facts about the mama. I think that it could have been 20 facts, or it could have been 5. I'm not sure about that. We'll see if that number 10 is important. But I think really what's important is that Winn-Dixie is giving her courage, that she's able to talk to the dog and that she likes taking care of the dog. So the heart of this too is, again, we're getting to know this extremely kind child who shares her brush and her toothbrush with this dog. And she's also so thoughtful that she's so curious about her mother. And it's obviously something she's been thinking about a great deal. Yet she doesn't want to hurt her father, the preacher's, feelings, because she knows he's sad too. So these are the things that are going on in my mind as I'm reading. I only read a few pages, but do you see how much I'm thinking as I'm reading? It is super important that when we do our read alouds that we share our thinking. Some days we might share a little more thinking than other days, but if this is really my quick lesson, my mini lesson for the day, and the whole lesson is about sharing my inner voice, I do want to make sure that students see that my thoughts that are going on are directly connected to the book. And I joke with my students sometimes that I'm not thinking about going out for ice cream. Nothing in this story leads me to thinking about going out for ice cream. And that I want to make sure that my thoughts, my inner voice that these thoughts are directly connected to the text of what's going on, and thinking about the questions, what happens in the text to make us wonder what happens next, thinking about what's really important, what's developing the plot, thinking about the interesting things. Like I said, does it really matter that she wanted to know 10 things? That was interesting. The author put that in there because it sort of intrigues us and catches us to want to think about that she's 10 and she'd like to know 10 things about her mom, but it didn't necessarily have to be 10. And again, the heart of this book is really developing the heart of this child, this kind child that we're getting to know, and the heart of the preacher who seems like a really caring person, but again, we heard that reference of that he's like a turtle and he sometimes goes back inside of his shell. So there is my lesson about teaching our students to have their inner voice going as they're reading to make sure that they are close to the text and comprehending. Thank you so much and take care.